Hello, everybody. Angel Arts here, and welcome to another episode of Let's Analyze the Snot Out of Dragon Age the Veilguard. As you can see, I am not alone. Yes, and as hopefully you can plainly see that the eye candy is flowing like milk and honey. I am joined by three colleagues, two of which I've actually met just recently and had the pleasure of really getting to know them. It's been super exciting. I will give each of them a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll just go around. Please tell everybody who you are, where you hail from, and a little bit about your channel as you'd like to share. So why don't I just kick things off with Micah?
Oh, that's me. Because who else would I be? Hello, everybody. My name is Micah. My channel is Micah Let's Play. I hail from the far west of the United States of America. Yes, it's sunny California, but it's not sunny right now. Um, a little bit about my channel. I do Let's Plays. I do discussion videos. Yeah, and that's kind of me in a nutshell, so if you wanna know more, you just gotta come on by and say hi. But with that said, I'll give it back to you, Hark.
Of course. Let's bump over to Noria.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I am Noria over at Chronicles of Noria, which is the channel where I do a lot of character analysis, theme analysis, story analysis across different media. So movies, TV shows, books, anime, and of course, video games. I also have a Let's Play channel where I've been putting up my episodes of Dragon Age the Veilguard called P.S. It's Noria, because of course it's going to be Noria. I am from the very sunny, I'm guessing you can tell, the very sunny Lagos in Nigeria. It has been so great, so fantastic to meet Ark and meet Micah and meet Knight as well, because I love the fact that video games, but specifically BioWare games, is one that unites us across different divides, across continents, across countries, across regions, across orientations, across belief systems, because what we all are drawn to are the compelling stories that are in these games. And it's just fascinating that we get to be in this world and we get to experience them. And I am so happy to be here and talk Dragon Age Veilguard.
Thank you, Noria. And last but not least, Knight.
Hi, I'm Knight, specifically Knight 1029. There's a story behind that. It's not that pretty impressive. It's literally just me saying, man, I want to play a multiplayer game. Damn, all the names are taken. I guess I'm going to have a usually unlocked name, but then I shortened it because it was better for searchability, having 1029, like 1029384756. That's a bit different, But yeah, I do mostly just like analysis stuff. Have been doing like stuff for BioWare recently because Veilguard's coming out. I like BioWare games. I want to talk about it, and so I've been doing just basically a bunch of analysis stuff. I also am a React Andy. I like reacting to a lot of dumb people. Okay, and that's mostly like where you might see a lot of my more popular videos about me. But yeah, I mean, I mostly make analysis stuff, and I like thinking as well. So not much else to say. Back to Angel Arts.
Thank you, Knight. As usual, I will have links to all three of the others' channel in the bottom, and that's really important because the way that specific collaboration is going to work is it's actually going to be divided up into four separate parts. We are each going to be hosting one of those quarter parts in each of their expected channels. So if you want to be able to see the entire conversation, please do go and visit my other colleagues' other videos as well. You essentially can watch them in any order that you would like, so choose your own adventure. But in addition to that, I have spent time watching content from all three of their channels. If you like my type of content, for those of you, I guess I should introduce myself. If you're coming from one of their channels, hi. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Angel Arts. I have been a YouTuber doing Let's Plays on my channel for more than 10 years now. I also have been hosting a number of tabletop campaigns, which is actually how I met Micah thoroughly. I've done 3 Dragon Age campaigns, 2 Mass Effect campaigns, a Harry Potter campaign, a Pokemon campaign, etc., etc. So if you are interested in any of that, please check that out. But enough about myself. For the other 3, if you are looking for people who are super passionate about this franchise, who have a lot of investment in story, writing, characters, character development, just like myself, I think you would be in very good hands visiting their respective channels as well, and I would highly encourage you to check them out. Um, the last thing I will say before we move forward is spoiler warning, we are going to try to keep this conversation as spoiler-free as possible, though I
Mhm.
will warn you that we will probably at least reference a bunch of things in the earlier stages of the game. So this is
Mhm.
essentially our first take, I think, of the earlier part of the Dragon Age game. How early are you talking about? We're going to try to limit spoilers as much as possible, but very specifically, we're pretty much just going to touch on things up through about to the point where you've recruited about half of your party,
Yeah.
roughly half of your party, or uh, roughly 15 hours in. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Use that as sort of a gauge as to like, at least content-wise, what we're going to be covering during our discussions. So, all that being said, I'm going to let other people speak now. Um, in these videos, we're going to be asking and answering two questions. So my first question for the congregation is, what are your thoughts so far on the combat and gameplay of Dragon Age Veilguard?
So I want to go first because my one will be a bit shorter, I think, but that's also because the way I played it. So BioWare has introduced like a customization difficulty, right? So we can like mess with some values. Okay, it can be a bit more extensive, but it is like pretty extensive. So I originally went for like just adventure, the basic middle of the road, in the middle difficulty, just because like let me try to see if played it intended way. And then I kind of like went lower because I'm like, and then I eventually like collapsed and said like, okay, no, I'm actually gonna do what I want to do, which is I'm going to basically make the enemy's health very, very low, very small, but I'm gonna make their damage extremely high, so they can basically like take me out if I'm not paying attention. And
Yeah.
why I wanted to do this was because I'm very interested in the type of games that allow you to make the combat feel a bit more like realistic, or like at least like as real as it possibly can be. Because like if you didn't know, if you get stabbed by someone, you're probably gonna die. If you don't get immediate attention, right?
Yeah.
Same with like being blasted with magic. Okay, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to have it for the enemies to be fair, and for me to also feel it like the effect as well.
Right.
Yeah, and then what I kind of found out by this is that the combat is very engaging in a very different way. Maybe not the intended way that Byro did it, but it does feel very engaging because if I don't pay attention, I've legitimately died a few times in the game due to a few boss fights and whatnot. There's this one early on in the crossroads that
Mm.
just couldn't stop killing me. Okay, I had to reload like 5 times just to kill him eventually. And then I eventually did it, but like it was really engaging because I'm like, okay, it doesn't feel like a sponge, right? That's really
Right.
good, but also doesn't feel like I'm doing literally nothing. Like it feels a lot more reactive, and especially on the way that Bioware has made the mage combat. I am lamenting that we can't just like use us the blunt end of our staff and just like whack them, like we did in Dragon Age 2. We have Spellblade for that, but that's a different thing entirely. Um, but like it's still interesting because now I still have to maneuver around the battlefield and make sure I don't die.
Yeah.
And it's really cool and it's really like interesting, right? Um, and like the other aspects of it, like the combo system and whatnot, are also good. But I'm not as well tuned with gameplay as I am like with other aspects of a video game. Um,
Mm.
the most I've got engaged with a video game ever was Dawn of War 2. And I don't think a lot of people here have played like Warhammer games, so I'm a bit alone here. Um, and that I only really got engaged with it because it has a very few selection of abilities, and it has you like play with those things in very specific ways. Um,
Yeah.
Railgun's kind of the opposite. It has a lot of abilities, and a lot of combinations and a lot of different ways you can play it. So it's a bit harder for me to tell if the combat is good or not, or if it's engaging with other people. Okay, I wanted to get it
Yeah.
out of the way because I think there's an important part of the discussion to do to have with the customization and how well and how good it is, right? It is really good customization, you know. So if you feel like there's something wrong with it, probably check the customization and see if there's a way for it to feel a bit better for you. Without the way, I throw it back to Hark.
Oh yeah. No, I wanted to hear what everybody else also has to say about the topic. So
I apologize everybody for the sounds you all about here. My neighbors are currently doing they're fixing up their apartments, and so it's very noisy construction work outside. So I am thankful that Knight was like, oh, you know, the customization, because I do think that the customization is great. I have not gotten into it yet because the way in which I am, just like with Knight, I enjoy combat, but it is when I know it's combat I enjoy. So that might sound confusing, but the whole point about it is that I look for, the reason I play a lot of video games is for the story. But when the combat is good, I am hooked on it. And I think that the Dragon Age the Veilguard combat is exquisite. Now, like I said, I've not gone into customization. I'm currently on Adventurer, because every game I get, I always play normal mode first. And then every subsequent playthrough, I hop the difficulty until I can get to Nightmare. Because I am a firm believer in I am going to get every crumb of value of money I spent on the game. I'm going to play it so many times. And I think that combat is also a great way for you to like have a new experience and really enjoy the game. Now, I love, you know, Knight mentioned about how there's like variation, for example, with regards the way in which you can explore combat and the abilities that are like available to you as a character. And I think that is great. I mentioned it in Micah's video, and just like Arcus mentioned, this is a 4-part series, so we would reference things we've said in earlier on videos. So it's always good for you to watch everything in its entirety, so you really get all the context. But like I mentioned in Micah's video, I am currently playing as 3 rooks. All right, no, I didn't mention it in the video. I mentioned it before we started the video. Sorry, y'all. We were having fun before we hit record. So I mentioned it earlier that I am playing as 3 separate rooks because I wanted to really like explore the different classes you can play as, right? And so at the moment, I am playing as a warrior. I've played as a rogue and I've played as a mage. My main rook at the moment, though, is a warrior, is a 2-handed warrior. And this is where I think that being able to customize, BioWare took we're going to give you limitless, boundless options, customization options in Character Creator. And we're going to go as far as we can to replicate it for you with the combat system as well. So that way you can role play how your rook fights. And I think it goes such a brilliant way in extending that further, because my 2-handed warrior rook is a stagger goddess. She is like, I leaned hard into the stagger build. I put on elements like equipments that increase my stagger. I'm going to all the units to build the stagger because there's nothing like, I'm like, that purple bar, I want to see that purple bar go, make it go high so that I can see the takedown. And I'm like, there is nothing as satisfying as the scrunch. Crunch of you swing that weapon and you're like, I bash your head in. Delicious.
Woo! You need a cigarette, my dear?
Right?
Look, I want what she's having.
Let's go.
Because my rook is like, she is bloodthirsty. Like, she's all like, I'm all fun and cool and stuff and jovial. But when it comes to fight, like, I am going to kill you deader than dead. And it is just very satisfying. So the controls it takes a bit of a while, because if, for example, I was playing Inquisition just before Veilguard got released, because I replay Mass Effect and Dragon Age every year like clockwork. They are my comfort games. I come to them every year. And I was just about wrapping up Inquisition when Veilguard released. And the reason why I say that the combat for Veilguard is so beautifully done, right, is because of the fact that if you've played Inquisition
Mm-hmm.
and you compare it to Veilguard, and as much as I love Inquisition, the combat in that left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
Right? It was very button mashy. You kept repeating things, and so you get bored very easily. Like I don't know about other people, but I get bored with Inquisition's combat very easily. But Veilguard is so much fun because the permutations of how you can execute your combat is so different and so varied.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, like I said, I went with like a big on stagger and a big on stagger build, and it's the fact that I know that, okay, I use my two-handed weapon, I can toss my shield. I am always doing the Captain America kick because I love it.
Yes.
And I'm always doing the ground stomp because so like I just think that the fact that, like I said, you can configure how your rook fights and plays.
Yeah.
And it is so responsive with exactly what you explore and how you play the game. It's very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying. And the same thing, and I know like a lot of people, for example, are like, oh, they love mage, it's just that they run out of mana a lot. And I'm like, because you need to go into that skill tree.
Yeah.
You need to go into that skill tree and look. Because if you, like right now, my mage, I'm going for a high mana mage. Like, I'm like, she's going to be like, sorry, I say she, because my mage is I'm playing a male rook for my mage. He's going to be like gulping up all that mana. Like, so he is less stagger, right? But I am like, I want every time I am playing with any of my skills, I need to be able to see instant responsiveness.
Yeah.
Right. So, but like I said, it's they carried the character creation. This is what your character looks like, and then they brought it into combat with this is how you get to choose how your character fights.
Right.
And if this is what your character loves to do in combat, you can focus on that heavily. Right.
Oh,
so and the same thing with Rogue, right? And I've had some people be like, oh, because of the fact that Rook is main, right? So with combat, I've seen people complain about the companions not being able to die. I'm like, I don't mind. In fact, I am grateful because I die like sometimes a lot. Not a lot. Like once I've gone deep into my build, I think it's funny, right? Veilguard is funny because you die easily.
Yeah.
And not a lot of like games with good combat do this. So it helps my immersion in that I died quicker when I was like lower level and I did not have access to the specific build I wanted, right?
Yeah.
So because if I'm playing, like if a game is big on combat, for me, as far as I'm concerned, like for role-playing purposes, I'm like, it makes no sense that I am dying at the same rate at level 25 as I was at level 1. Because logically, level 1, like I'm not as trained. I don't have enough equipment. I've not built things up in a way that, okay, it's understandable that I die every other boss. But like now, I'm figuring things out, right? So the further up you go, the less frequently you die. If you're dying, it's because you're making some silly, like you would be like, that was a silly mistake that led to that. Okay, I'm going to do this, right? And even if you do, it's not going to be as frequent as when you were just starting.
Yeah.
Right. So I do not mind that the companions don't die because then it means that they can revive me. And I'm like, thank you very much. I will take that. Thank you. I appreciate it. And the way in which the combat is not just yours, because I think when a lot of people were trying to explain. So when people went for the playtest and they came back and they were doing videos, I was fascinated. So I was watching the role-playing lore videos and I was also watching the combat videos because I do enjoy like good combat. And it occurred to me that a lot of people are not aware that part of a good combat system and how you know a game has a good combat system is when you realize that there are so many different elements that you can mix and match and you have to consider and you have to plan before you then move forward, right? So I know a lot of people like to compare BioWare games with Souls game, and I'm like, it's not a Souls game. Like, this is an RPG. Like, they're different. But the amount of research you will do with a Souls game, like, if you keep that in mind when you're going into Veilguard, it elevates the combat experience to a T. Down to my companions, I really started enjoying the combat when I was like, because for the longest time I was stuck on the abilities they had and everything else, and then I was like, wait, hold up, Noria, like, have you gone in to really explore? Because at some time, early on, I was like, I'm going for a high stagger build.
Yeah.
And then what I started doing was also boosting my companions to add to my stagger build.
Yeah.
And then ensuring that their abilities was a perfect match to mine. That was when it got so much fun. It got so much fun. The only complaint I would have about the combat is the combat camera, right? Because sometimes I'm like, what do you mean? Like, the boss is behind me. Rook, we need to move, Rook. Like, camera, turn around. There needs to be a focus. Like, I wish there was a way in which it could be consistent with me tracking.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the camera does not angle well enough in the middle of combat, and then it throws me off a bit. Like, it's never led to me dying, because what usually happens once I'm stuck is that I roll. Whether I'm playing as a rogue or a mage or a warrior, I'm like, we're going to roll our way out of here, because the camera is doing that annoying ass thing where I can't see where the moves is. I can't see what is coming next, and then I roll out of the way. Right? So that is what happens. But like, that is the only, that camera, that focal point, I'm like, there needs to be a way in which it could be. I think it could have been better. But other than that, like, the combat is good, right? The combat is good. And, you know, you've had people that are like, oh, if you're trying to play like a ranged character, they always seem to rush you anyway. And I'm like, once again, then the question you should ask yourself is that, do you have a warrior in your party who you've activated their taunt ability? Yeah. Because it's not just, I got Davrin or I got Hash. It's, right, but did you go in there and tinker away? And did you invest in their taunt? Like, because you have skill points. Once again, it's how are you playing? The Dragon Age, the Veilguard should be called like Choice Guard or something, because the amount of choices that they have put into the game, they're like, in every aspect of it, we want you to make whatever choice you want. And the fact that they brought that into combat as well is incredible. So all of this to say, and I've been talking for a long time, is I love the combat. I love the combat. So
yeah,
good.
I mean, like one thing I wanted to talk, like, as you were talking about, like, so many choices, like that like, I remember when they first released the skill tree, and I'm like, man, this is a lot of nodes, right? Like, obviously, like, I think some people are too focused on the abilities and not necessarily like the passives, and like, I can't remember, like, you have the passive thing, the triangle, the name of the circle
skills,
one.
There's passives, then you have your ultimate ability. Yes.
Yeah. And like I think the difference between like previous Bio games and how they do that, right, is that like as we see with Origins, right, the combat system is very like loose. You have like some structure, which is like your class one, which is like, okay, you're a rogue, you can do dual-handed, or you can do archery. Okay, cool. You're a warrior, you could do shield and board, or you can shield and board. What? Then you can
sword
like
and board.
And, like,
sword and shield.
You know, 2 shields. You know, why not, right?
Yeah.
You can also do like 2-handed, but like they were very tailored. But like the other abilities, the other like adjustments, all of the interesting, cool abilities and cool builds were mostly for mages, right? Mages they got like the what if I just did a bunch of mana clashing and whatnot? What if I just made like a bunch of zombies? Like that was where it was mostly in, and not only that, but it wasn't really telegraphed to you, right? With Veilguard, it has, as you like were saying, there's a lot more structure to the path, right? You can definitely see, like, if you go to this build, you can, like, there's a build for that, right? There's a lot of builds, and it's a lot of complexities for those builds, right? And companions are, like, just supporting those builds a lot, right? Because as a right, I face a lot of issues in the terms of people keep coming after me. Because I am obviously the biggest threat, right? Kill me, okay? And we're done, okay? Everything's done, you know? Gildanane, sorry. No, it's Gillanon. Sorry, Gillanon.
Right.
Is it because I keep calling her Gillanine though? I like calling like this
No.
Elganon is Elganon and Gillanine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing it up. Okay, I
Yeah.
hate the
Oh,
fact
good.
that we have like two different non sounds. Okay, name non. But like it's cool that like the other companions like help you alter your kind of build and what you can do. Right. It's a lot
Yeah.
more
Mm.
meaningful than like what Origins was doing, which was okay. So like here's like a free form. You can choose what to do. We're not really telling you what to do. It's like and I feel like that allows it to guide it more. Right.
Yeah.
Again, yeah. Anyways.
No, I agree. Real talk. I grew up playing fighting games. So action RPG button mashers do combinations. That's my jam. Like real talk. I would say for sure when it comes to the combat system, this is the combat system I've always wanted BioWare to do when I was playing Inquisition. Don't get me wrong, I love Inquisition, but just sitting there holding a button for my mage to, and then I play Knight Enchanter and I'm just swinging my lightsaber around. It's fun. It's cool. But when you play as a mage, because right now I've only played as the mage class, what I can tell you is that I've played Hogwarts Legacy, I played God of War, I'm playing Dragon's Dogma 2. Those games are action RPGs. But I will tell you, I would say in Dragon's Dogma, you feel the limitation of having so many abilities. You do feel like, God, if I had this, I could make this work. And I'm constantly running back to an end to adjust my abilities. With Veilguard, it's like, oh, I like this. I can add to my mana because I'm building a mage that's a damage mage. I want to be high damage as much as possible. And I'm seeing how I'm creating my spell blade. I'm going in that direction. And I like having that freedom of customization with the combat. The combat is very snappy. I know a lot of people were more wanting that CRPG style with Origins or like with Baldur's Gate 3. Don't get me wrong, I've never played Origins, so I can't speak on that. But from playing Baldur's Gate 3, I like that kind of combat where it's strategy and you're using your terrain and everything. But I feel constricted and I don't like that. I like the freedom of there's a target, I'm going after it. That's me. Again, being a fan of fighting games, that's always been the style of combat I prefer. I kind of wish that Baldur's Gate 3 would have had a combat system like this. Could you imagine Baldur's Gate 3 with this kind of combat system? That game would literally be unstoppable. But when it comes to Veilguard, one other thing that I like how you were saying, Noria, the companions don't die. I realize I use them a lot. I went in my playthrough, I realized I call on them quite a bit because I've ran into some bosses and they're Nev and Balara have come in a clutch for a boy and helped me out quite a bit. And I would say if you have not played this game and maybe you're just watching it, you actually have to have a hand-on experience in order to truly understand what we're talking about, especially with the nuances. Because when you start adding in those passives, it starts to make your build feel even more fleshed out than before, especially when you're playing as a mage. Like for me, like again, I haven't played the other two classes, but playing as a mage, you can really feel the difference. And honestly, that's my 2 cents on the matter. I really like it. And also the customization when it comes to difficulty. I haven't played around with it because I'm a noob. I'm on basic bitch syndrome. And I'm just playing regular adventure. I haven't tinkered with anything other than turning off all the UI stuff because I don't need all that. But so far, best combat system that they've ever had. From Inquisition to this, I love it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
You made it such an excellent point, Maka. There's like Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like because I can use that example. So Baldur's Gate 3, right? You can kind of tell like just by looking at it, like how it's playing, right? Like that's the sort of benefit with most turn-based games, right? You know how it feels and how it's going to be, right? But for action games, it's a lot harder to get the feel of it, and I think a lot of the stuff that we saw for Veilguard coming out, right, originally, it's hard to gauge how good that combat system is because like it's an action game. It's fast paced. You have to like react to a lot of people coming at you, right? And especially
Yeah.
that changes on the difficulty, the build, everything, right? So like, Michael, you made an excellent point that like you can't really understand how the game feels until you've actually like have it in your hands, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that's an excellent point.
Yes.
I have a lot to say on this topic, so
Okay.
bear with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I love this conversation because you can very clearly see how different players we are and how different play styles we have. I am the exact opposite of Micah.
Mhm.
I am a very old school RPG player. Like my favorite were from classics, like old school Final Fantasy, where you're
Oh,
like
yeah.
waiting for that ATB bar to fill up, like the time-based stuff. And like, oh, it's my turn.
Right?
Hack. Like
Right?
so my comfort level, at least, my comfort level is more slower paced, Baldur's Gate 3 type of combat where I can take my time. I don't
Right.
feel like I'm like playing keyboard gymnastics. Like, oh my gosh, oh, that was the block. No, that was the block. That was the keyboard. So that was like one thing that I definitely struggled with. And again, I don't fault BioWare for this. This is more it's not you, BioWare, it's me. Um there is a learning curve to be
Mhm.
had for a player like myself who's trying to
Mhm.
figure out, you know, how exactly the feel of a more action oriented game is going to work. And
Yeah.
yeah, I know I can remap my keys, but I try to start with the default to like how the I'm doing mouse and keyboard, just how the developers like intended for you to map your keys, just to see if it makes sense. I'm
Mm.
still trying to get over, especially in the early on, that spacebar is not jump.
Yeah.
Spacebar is dodge, which is tough because another game
Yeah.
that I'm also playing on the side at spacebar is jump. So that in of itself always got me. So
Mm.
the learning curve was a little bit tough for me as an old school gamer. But once it finally clicked, and it probably
Oof.
took me like 10 hours in, once
Mhm.
it finally kicked, I was like, oh yeah, like I got it. Like I got the groove. And it is a different feel. It's got that adrenaline rush, and you're like, oh yeah, like I got it. Um, so yeah, it's different from what I'm accustomed to, but what I will say is I'm happy that BioWare is able to encourage me out of my comfort zone
Yeah.
and still
Mm.
be able
Mm.
to appreciate this play style and just absolutely love it. Now, there are aspects of it that I do miss, and I preface this by saying is I
Excuse me.
understand you can't have everything,
No.
Mhm.
right?
That's
Because
fair.
I
That's
I
fair.
do miss going into this. I was a little skeptical, but I wanted to be open-minded about the fact that we no longer have three party members. We have two party members joining us,
Yeah.
and B, that you can't switch from one character to another. Because
Mm.
what I love about games like Dragon Age Inquisition is sometimes, yeah, I started as a mage, but sometimes I just want to see what the warrior feels like. Sometimes,
Mhm.
I want to switch over and, hey, Balara's using her magic through a bow. Like, I want to play
Mm.
like that. Or like,
Yeah.
hey, like I know I'm not a warrior, but I wanna feel what it feels like vicariously through Tosh, like
Mhm.
Mm.
being a
Mm.
warrior, even if it's just for a few seconds. So for me, I really like just having that variety and being able to play different characters. Just because, maybe I don't want to play a mage the entire way through in a
Yeah.
Yeah.
gameplay, without having to like restart the game and play another rook. Um, but I get it because that doesn't really work based on the combat style that they're doing. Like
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
something that's a lot more Mass Effect, being able
Yes.
to jump around from one character to another, like it's not as cohesive. So
No.
Yeah, like
it makes sense. I'm sorry, go ahead, Knight.
sorry, like because you're so right on the point. Like because as I was playing the game, like I kind of like eventually realized like yeah, this is why Bio didn't allow us to switch to characters, okay? Because like it would have been like a fucking nightmare, okay?
Yeah, it would be a nightmare.
Like
Yes.
Yeah.
like you would switch from another character because not only that, because they would also have less like abilities and skills and whatnot. They
Yes.
would feel very
Yeah.
different to play. But
Yes.
also it's like you're the character. The game is so focused around Rook and like having Rook be the main character.
The main
Uh,
character.
in comment as well. And it's like okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can't switch to another companion and
Yes.
have that same feeling without it being like a huge disconnect, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Totally
Yes.
agree.
A-
So
and
go ahead,
also
Nate.
because of the fact that the combat means that enemies are drawn to Rook,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So who would they be drawn to if you switch to Balara, for example, do the enemies know that now this is Rook in Balara, like playing as Balara?
Right.
Are they still chasing Rook,
Right.
who is now Balara? Like, I can just imagine how, or not even now Balara, are they chasing Rook, who is now controlled by the computer? Like, I can just imagine how all that questions would happen, especially
Right.
specifically for the type of combat that this game is
Right.
going with.
Right. And so, one thing that I really have come to appreciate is yeah, sure, this wasn't what I was hoping for, but it's still crazy fun. And it's still super satisfying, and I appreciate it for what it is. And you know what? If I want to play something that's more Dragon Age Dragon Age Inquisition is still there. I can still go back and still play with that if that's what I really feel like
I
playing.
will most likely do that, actually.
Exactly. So yeah, it did what it was supposed to do, and BioWare executed it very well. The other thing I will also mention is mage combat is crazy awesome because I remember, I joke about this all the time. The mage combat, the basic attacks for mage combat in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition is blast, blast, twirl, you shall not pass.
That's
Blast, blast, twirl, you shall not
You
pass.
shall not
Boom.
pass.
Like it was, and that was it. Like that was the gist of your combat, which I mean still was a step from Dragon Age Origins, where it was just blast, blast.
Yeah.
Wait, blast
At least
again.
now they're doing the twirl.
Something.
At least
So-
you did a little twirl.
it's still a
Right.
step up. So I was so impressed by how dynamic and how exciting and how mobile a mage was. I'm not just standing in place. Like that was the thing that I had an issue with. All I'm doing is just standing in place and just shooting bolts. And the rogue is just like all over the place, and the warrior is not as mobile, but still, they're
Doing
moving their
stuff.
feet a little bit. They're still doing stuff. And so as soon as I saw the gameplay footage for the first time, I'm like, this is genius. Like I love not just the staff combat, but adding in the new orb and dagger gameplay.
The dagger and orb.
That's my default. My default is dagger and orb. It's so fun. It's harder. It's a lot harder to use, a lot harder to master, especially because of the blocking mechanism is different from the staff.
Yeah.
So because which is what I've actually been doing. So like you remember I said that I'm playing as 3. I had to temporarily pause the mage and the rogue because I was like, I don't want to now get it all mixed up in my head because I want to be more focused on like combat stuff. But yes, because I was like, oh, let me try the dagger and orb, and I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah,
This is a whole
it's so
new
different.
learning
So different.
Yes, it is.
So different.
I'm like, I wanted the fire to go this way. Why are you going this way?
Right.
Oh, it's because it's following the direction. Like it's the dagger is an athame, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
an athame. You're using it to channel, and so therefore you need
Yeah.
to be facing whatever you're channeling
Yes.
towards. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But like,
Yeah.
why did it like so? Yeah, it's very much fun.
It's very
Yeah.
different. It's very fresh after mainly playing a mage on every single version. I'm glad they introduced that, and the fact that you can switch very seamlessly between the two. So I'm so happy that they improved mage combat just for the basic attacks. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh,
I know.
okay.
I wanted to. So
go ahead.
like,
Jump in.
Yeah, because like I think Veilguard's combat on its own is like really impressive, right? Like compared to other combat systems, like in like video games, it's like very impressive, and it's especially because like Mike also said, like some games sometimes overload you with abilities, right? And like that's fair because you want the players to have like a lot of different abilities, but in the same vein, it also does make it a bit harder to decide what you want to do, especially if a lot of the abilities are very similar. So like it does suck that we don't get like how Origins had its ability system and its combat system works, so like the other games. But like in Veilguard, it is a lot more engaging in a moment-to-moment basis, right? Like for people who don't like Veilguard's combat, because you like Origins combat or something like that, this game isn't going to be for you. I'm sorry. Like, there's nothing much about it. Now, is this saying like the combat's like actually like terrible garbage and like BioWare has like sinned against humanity? No, the game's actually like quite good. like anyone who like plays it and like tries to engage with it in good faith, like will find out like this is a really solid combat system, you know.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yes.
The one thing that I really wanted to dive very deeply in about gameplay mechanics, as a software engineer,
Mhm.
and a programmer, and not just a software engineer, but as a front end developer, whose main focus is on the user experience and the user interface, is BioWare introduced so many awesome quality of life features in the UX. And here's the number of some of my favorites. First of all, when you do like pause with a tab and you bring up, the party control system,
Yeah.
I love a lot of the visual cues that they give you. First of all, they like highlight for you, hey, this is a power that is a weakness, like
Yes.
that
Yes.
establish the weakness of this character. I'm like, that is genius. So you don't have to guess. For
I
people
never
like
use it, but I appreciate that it's there.
it is there. Like, oh yeah, cool. Like that's awesome. For people like myself who are slower paced, who needs a little help, us older folks, more of the Emmerich persuasion folks.
I don't even mean
I
that.
need
Like,
I need
I
that
don't
to
even
be
mean
spelled
that
out to
I
me a
don't.
little.
For me, when I say that I don't use it, I mean like you tell me like, oh, this character is resistant to fire, and I was like, I don't care, fire.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I meant by I don't
Uh,
use it.
my play style as my mage is I always like to have whatever element the character's weakness is. That's like
Yeah.
my
Mm,
gameplay.
mm,
I love that from a
mm.
strategic standpoint. So having that
Yeah.
spelled out to me is great. The other part that I love is that it shows for you very visually where the combo chains are. It says, hey,
Yes.
if you want to prime with this character, you can detonate with that character. And I was like,
Yeah.
I
Right?
love that because
Right?
they did have that primer detonate system in Inquisition, and
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much I badly needed this because I did not take advantage of that system nearly enough in Dragon Age
True.
Inquisition, and that was a slower paced game.
Mhm.
So that was just genius. And then other things. So I think hopefully this is not really a spoiler, but if at least by 15 hours in,
Yes.
So cool.
the dagger has a game mechanic in it that I
Yes.
love because
Yes.
every single, this is not a plot related thing, but
No.
every single companion has a unique ability that just lets you
Yeah.
get past a certain obstacle.
Yeah.
And I was expecting, oh, well, I don't have this companion with me at this moment. I guess I can only get past this obstacle when I have that companion in
When
the
I bring
party.
them
Right.
over. Yeah.
Right.
Nope. Because of this, you can actually access those
Yeah.
unique abilities from people who are not in your party. And I'm like,
Yes.
you kidding me, Dyer? That is genius. That is absolute
It's so
genius.
cool.
It's so
Yeah.
cool. It just takes out a lot of the annoyances, the unnecessary annoyances,
Yes.
I think. Like, I get decisions should matter and who you have in your party should have an impact. But for things like that, I'm like, that's just one
That's a really
unnecessary,
good one. Yeah.
like, quality of life thing that I think really impressed me.
Yeah.
The revive ability was also something that Nori gave because that was one of my worries is in Mass Effect, for example. If my shepherd dies, like nobody was reviving my shepherd.
Right.
Yeah.
That was it.
Shepherd's
So
down.
so yeah, it's
These
like
sons of bitches, okay? They want
Right.
me to revive them, but they can't do it
Right.
themselves.
Right.
Gosh darn it.
Right.
that Metal Gear Solid Rook. What happened? Rook. You know? So I like that by giving them certain equipment, they can revive your
Mhm.
Rook, which I think is awesome because that was like my biggest complaint. Like I know they can revive me. Like the other party
Yeah.
members can pick me up. It's okay. By the way, what they can't do is they can't rescue me if I jump in the water and can't swim. Because apparently my Rook is the same as me, where I can't swim a damn. But I'm sorry, nobody in my party cares. Oh, Rook is
he'll be aight.
drowning. Rook is
Rook
drowning.
is
All right.
drowning.
Like my romance is right there. My boyfriend's right there. He's like, "Oh, you'll be fine, babe. You'll be
Right.
okay." Excuse me.
So vividly. I was in Treviso, right? there was just this one part of water there, and my companions were literally like on the edge, and I just fell in. I'm like, I'm grasping for air, I'm grasping for someone to help me, and they're just like standing there, like, yeah, whatever, sure, man.
Yeah.
Luke Candace is like bitter and sweet, like a kiss goodbye, and they just go down.
Yeah. So there's that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, game mechanics wise, which I also wasn't sure how I would feel as someone who's very hardcore D&D, is the fact that you can respec anytime for free. Anytime,
Yes.
refund anytime. I wasn't sure how I would feel about that because I spent a lot of time planning out, this is going to be my build, this is the skills I'm going to pick, because I know once I'm locked in, that's it. Maybe there's a way to respec, but you have to pay however much gold, and maybe it gets increasingly more expensive each time you respec, which I accept because, I feel like there's, you gotta decide what you're gonna build, and there's consequences, and once you're locked in, you're locked in. And so when I was told, no, you can respec whenever you want, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like,
Right.
like really? But I came to really appreciate it a lot because, yeah, I appreciate the flexibility of experimenting, of figuring out how you're going to build your rook in what way, and how are you going to synergize with the abilities of the other characters. And I realized because the combat system is so rich and it is so nuanced, it would be like really annoying to a player to feel like they don't have the ability to respec as much as they want. So I ended up loving it for this game. And I was worried, they're nerfing it, like they're holding our hand too much. No, I think they did it intelligently. I think that was really smart of them.
Because like with respecing like abilities, Ryan, when you respec like your whole level and like you go from level 1 all the way to the level you're currently at, like when you accidentally like click on an ability or select a passive or whatever that you weren't supposed to do it, like what meaning is there beyond just like, oh man, that sucks, man? Because like all it really says to you as the player is just like, I made a fuck up. Okay, I'm either just gonna reload to the prior save just to like not have this, or I'm just gonna deal with it and be a bit frustrated for the entire game, right?
Yeah.
So like it's not in the same level as like okay, I romanced the character, I fully did the romance, I'm locked off from everyone else, right? And it's not like, I think I want to actually do the other romances, and then you switch
Right.
It's like that's very different, same with other ones. But for gameplay stuff, it's just like, because most RPGs eventually get, even with Origins, right, with Awakening, just like, okay, time to like give you the player a respec thing, right? No downsides to it, right? There's no value in just like accidentally like screwing up your build,
Right. Right. Yeah.
And what I wanted to just add, and because I'm adding this in because I know that Arca has mostly spoken on the combat and the gameplay mechanics, is there's something I actually really like, and I don't think I've necessarily seen a lot of people mentioning it. How the different ultimate abilities speak to the factions. I think it's very interesting from a story perspective.
Yes.
Because it fits the characterization, right? So you're playing as a warrior, right? But you are drawn to, like, imagine, like, you're playing as a warrior, but you're a member of the One Watch. So it only makes sense that, of course, if you go with the Reaper and then the Reaper's ultimate abilities, you get to create this, and what looks like a full-on whirlwind, hailstorm thing of death and destruction, like, and rejuvenates you, right? Or because, and the colors, these are little things that might not matter to some people, but I like it for role-playing perspectives, because of course it makes sense that if I am choosing a warrior Mon Watch, right, of course it's going to be the greens of the necropolis, right? Or for blood and glory as the ultimate ability for the slayer, because that's the Lord of Fortune. Why wouldn't it be as loud and brash and gold and in your face? Because that is what the Lord of Fortunes are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I just, how even with the combat, even in the combat, right, BioWare is like, we're going to still take on that faction role playing, and you're going to
Yeah.
see it reflected in the different ultimate abilities, how they show up. Like
Yes.
Evoker is so, you're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Picky
this
piggybacking
makes sense. Yeah, so
piggybacking off of that, since you're talking about factions and classes, one of the things I was very curious about going in was, what is, if you're an Antivan Crow, what is an Antivan Crow mage like? What is an assassin mage like? And one of the specializations is actually an Antivan Spellblade, I think.
Yes.
And which focuses a lot more bonuses on the dagger and orb. And I'm
Yes.
like, that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
what
It
that
makes so
makes
much
perfect
sense.
sense.
Makes
Yes.
so much
So I'm
sense.
glad they did that for the people who were just curious, like, how is that gonna work? Like, I figure, yeah, mages can make themselves invisible and can cast spells to make them better assassins. But on paper, like on paper it was interesting, but then actually experiencing myself was like, okay, that gels.
Yeah, even with
Yeah.
the Lord of Fortune rogue, right? With the Lord
Mhm.
of Fortune rogue, and then you realize that, of course, they're going to be the ones with the giant ass cannons that they're going to be like, we're going to
I
blast
love it. Yes,
I'm
yes,
like,
yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this makes so much sense for
Yeah.
who they are. Like as a faction, it's genius. It's absolutely genius.
Yeah.
The last two game mechanic things that I really liked was attack my target bonuses.
Yes.
Because I feel like it's awesome that they are encouraging you. They're giving you an explicit game mechanic reason to actually use that feature, to actually
Yes.
command and not ignore your companions, to actually feel like, hey, you target this one, you target that one, because I know that if you do that, I get this bonus.
I
So
get
I
this
thought
bonus.
that is like, I've never seen that in any other
Same.
game, and I thought it was so, yeah, there's so many things. I say this during my Let's Plays, like, that is smart. Like, that is genius. Why didn't I think about that? That's a great way to encourage people to actually use, you know, the game mechanics in the gameplay. And then the very last small thing that I really loved is when you are going through the crossroads or going into the Illuvian, being able to choose the
Yeah.
option to just directly travel to the quest.
Travel
Yes.
Instead of having to slog through the crossroads,
over and
just
over and over again.
just say, hey,
Yeah.
just take me immediately to Treviso, or take me right to
Yeah.
Dockstown.
The
Yeah.
only time when I actually use the crossroads is when I'm like, okay, I want to grind a bit, kill a couple of, because of course I know that
Yeah.
I'm going there, we're going to find some more people. You're like, I'm
Yes.
going to kill you for some point just to boost things up, but also because I like checking in on the spirits. I'm like, how is the market? Are we flourishing? Are we good? Like, is there anything
Right.
worrying? Okay, cool.
Yes.
You all are happy and good. Okay, I'm not going to come for a while. I'm just going to like fast travel a bit, but eventually I'm
Yes.
going to come on and check on you again. So I totally agree. I like
Yeah.
totally agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and the very last thing I will say is that I am very happy game mechanics wise that they didn't hinterlands you in the crossroads. You know what I'm talking about? They didn't hinterlands you. I didn't feel like I'm stuck in the crossroads and I got to do everything in the crossroads before I move the story along.
They kind of did the opposite, you know. They were really
really?
saying like, get the fuck out of the crossroads. Okay, what are you doing,
Right.
dumbass? You know?
Get out of
Yeah.
there.
Like,
Go do other
you need to go to like these places so you can get the key to open this place. Okay, come on, get out of here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I told myself, nope, Crossroads is not going to be Hinterlands 2.0.
Right.
I'm getting over to Treviso or Dockstown or wherever it is I'm trying to go. So
Right.
there you go. Micah, you were trying to say something?
No, I was gonna say about the fast travel thing. I really like that as well. Once I unlocked it, it is extremely beneficial. But I do what you do, Naria. I'm like, I need to grind up a little bit. I need to get some because I want to use my points and all that stuff. Yes, I agree. But yeah, I'm gonna leave that alone. But yeah, the combat in this the combat system, in case you didn't know, it's good shit.
It is good. It is good. It's good. Oh,
Right?
awesome.
Do any of you three have any final thoughts on gameplay and combat?
Well, we know Mass Effect's gonna have a killer ass melee system.
Oh,
That part.
That would be nice. I would love
like-
that.
That was
I
so
would
nice.
love that.
get on
I
that.
want that.
Get on it.
I want that.
Ah.
I want to be. Yeah, I want to be.
Bioware, you made the sickest Omni Blade you could have ever created. Okay, let me use it beyond Andromeda. It's just like,
I want to
Right?
be a Krogan Vanguard. I
Let's
want to be a
go.
Krogan
I want-
Vanguard for my next Mass Effect game. Yes.
Right? I
Uh,
need this.
Yes.
I need this. Oh my god.
And I want to be able to adjust the forehead of my Krogan proportionately. I'm just saying,
I
Bioware,
want
take
to
notes.
have the size
Take notes.
Bioware that allows me to catch an aircraft carrier. Okay,
There we
Let's
go.
go.
please.
Oh my
Bioware.
god. I just want to be an
It's
Asari.
more
Let's go.
accurate.
Yes. Anything else about combat or gameplay before we go to the next
I
question?
just said I like the game plays so well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is like
Mm.
I mentioned it in like I mentioned it in my last video. Like
Yes.
it plays so smoothly, no bugs.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
it's just,
bug.
it's
It
just
is so little bugs.
incredible.
Yes.
Yo,
I don't think I've
In-
ran into
in-
any.
I've run into two, but they're minor. I've run into
Okay.
two, but they're minor. So, but in general, great, as
Oof.
bug-free as possible of a release as I've
Yeah.
experienced from a game of this magnitude. For
Yes.
sure.
yo,
For
like
sure.
Yeah.
it's yeah, like yeah, you're so right. It's not just like it's bug free, right? Because like a lot of games are bug free. It's a bug free game on this scale. This game
Yeah.
is
Yes,
not,
on
like
this scale.
20 hours, right?
Yes.
It's like over 100 hours, and it's just like
Yeah.
Yes.
the most bugs I've experienced is like when I change my avatar for my Canary character, it doesn't really register, right?
Mm.
Like I have to like put it on and then off again. But I'd like such a minor annoyance, you know. Like
Yeah.
I've not experienced any weird animations, any like game bug crashes, you know. I haven't experienced like any weird like noodling effects to my characters. Like
Mhm.
I've like legitimately like just been waiting like yeah, this is just a very bug-free game, especially compared to
Yeah.
like Bioware's previous two games, which didn't have a lot of bugs.
Exactly. Andromeda
Yeah.
and Anthem,
Oh.
like,
Yeah.
they deserve that flowers. The only bug I ran into was at the very start, the CDS bar scene. The part where, you know, as Rook, you lean back and you pass the bottle to Varric. My main Rook, Larima, her face changed briefly for like
Mm.
a millisecond. I'm like,
Okay.
whose face is that? Because
Mhm.
that ain't my girl. But it was like
Right.
a millisecond. And after that, like my girl's
Is
face
my
was
copy
like,
haunted? Bioware,
I was
Bioware, what
Yes.
did you do?
Yes.
right? And then when I played, like when I did the second and third Rooks,
Mhm.
no bugs. Like the face was the same. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, see, whatever it was caught and fixed immediately.
Yeah.
Because like that early scene with Rook was like what, maybe 4 or 5 hours after the game's release.
Yeah.
So it was very early. And I just
Yeah.
love the fact that, you know, they released their latest patch on
Yeah.
N7 Day. And it wasn't a long list of fix this bug, fix this glitch, fix this, fix it. Like you could see that and you're like, the team should be so proud. They put
Yeah.
out a
Yeah.
complete product.
Yeah.
A complete
Gold is the standard,
product.
honey.
I want to give a fair warning to the viewers who are watching that this can be a touchier topic. I know that this is a topic that's heavily debated.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that, to quote Noria,
Mhm.
everybody has their own opinions. Opinions are like a-holes. Everyone has one. This happens to be mine. Or so this happens to be ours.
Right.
So, but I think it's also very relevant to a lot of things that are happening outside of the game, like within
Yeah.
the community, and not just within the gaming community and fans of Dragon Age Veilguard, but in the world itself.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I apologize first, like ahead of time, if some of us might sound a little soapboxy. But I think it's important to at least be open-minded, just hearing the thoughts and opinions of people, especially people from a marginalized group.
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the worst things that you can do as a disservice to yourself is to not allow yourself to be educated, to not allow yourself to be informed or to be exposed to things that perhaps you haven't been exposed or thought of before. So
Yeah.
hopefully that sets the runway for my question is, what are your thoughts about the use of inclusion and representation in this game?
I mentioned this in the video that Micah and I made before the game was released when we're talking about our excitement and hope for Veilguard. And I mentioned that personally, I figured out my identity because of media. And it is through media that I have dealt with trauma. Trigger warning for those that are listening. It is through media that I dealt with my assault. It is through media that I realized that I have depressive episodes, what they are, what they mean, how to heal from that. It is through media that I discovered my identity of being queer and what that means, right?
Right.
It's even through media that I realized that, oh, so this is what ADHD, right, is and what it looks like, and how to navigate the space. So I'm always somebody that is very team. Representation in media is important. And I think that and I might use some big words and all of that. I apologize for that in advance. But because a lot of people cringe when they hear the word, and I'm like, the reason why fascist governments and society, the first thing they try and do is curtail what kind of media their people can watch, read, interact with, share, talk about, is because they understand that there's a lot of power to people feeling seen.
Yeah.
And because the world in which we live in is such a vast one, I think it is quite unfair for anybody to be like, well, I wish that wasn't there. Especially in a video game, because you control the buttons you press, you control the dialogue choices that you take. So, for example, with Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I mentioned this, in our before we started recording, that I created 3 rooks, and one thing that drove me to create my second rook was the mirror scene. So this is still very early on in the game, y'all. Like Arcus mentioned, we're not going into heavy spoiler territory. In fact, it's as minimal spoilers as possible. So this is very early. Like after the prologue, you're sent to, retrieve your first official companion that you get, because Nev and Arden are just your companions from the jump. After you've retrieved that companion and you've helped their faction for a brief moment of time, you're automatically, apologies for that, you're automatically moved to your next step, which is to retrieve the ritual dagger. So all of this happens like within the first 10 hours. And I say 10 hours if you spend 4 hours creating your rook like we did.
Exactly.
So this happens very early on in your game. And then by the time you're back in the lighthouse, and this is your second time being in the lighthouse, right? You're informed that, rook things have been sent to the meditation room, which is your room. And you get to unpack. And so you get the mirror scene where you get to choose dialogue, right? Like Arcus said, as mentioned earlier on. And I think it was either Arc or Micah, where they're like, you could, these are the decisions you took in your origin, your backstory, right? Do you regret it? Do you regret the blowback? Do you understand where your faction members are coming from and why they took the decisions they took, right? So there are different threads that you can choose. But there is an option there for gender identity. And for my second rook, right, Darren McCarr, I made him trans because of that option. Because what I did was I looked through all the options, and you can always go back.
Yeah.
You're not locked in to saying that all your rooks are trans. It's an option given.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you have certain people, right? And I'm not going to say they're fans of the games, because fans of the games, we've known that these have been one of the most diverse, well-represented gaming franchises. BioWare has never hid the fact that representation matters to them, because they are created by a diverse group of creators, right? Developers, artists, writers. That has always been, diversity has always been in the back end. And so it is reflected in the story, the products that they make, right? And that's if you call yourself a BioWare fan, this is something that you know from the jump. You're not surprised by it, right? There have been people that have written to like David Gator, for example, and like, oh, they hate the fact that Zevran flirts with them. Like, oh, sorry, apparently you do not realize that there are what gay people in the world. You get to say, oh, I'm not interested, thank you, because BioWare is not making a rapey game. They say, okay, you're not interested, and they walk away. Like, but that you want to live in this tiny little bubble where that is not an option is very, very unfair, because the rest of the population, just like you, deserve to be seen and represented in the game.
Absolutely.
We deserve to see. Yeah,
just to
sorry.
build a quick point on that one, because I literally just thought of it. So like so many people who are like really are like dissing the whole like trans thing, right? Because obviously the like we've moved on from like seeing headlines of like, damn dude, gay characters in a video game. We should have a cultural war about that. And like, no, we've moved past the point, like well past the point. But the mindset of why people are still saying that like still kind of remains, right? Because for a lot of like people, they can imagine a lot in the fantasy setting, but they can't imagine a trans person in that fantasy setting, right?
Yeah.
Which to me is kind of weird, because like, why wouldn't you, right? Like again, like the same with like the gay people stuff, right? Like we can imagine a lot in the fantasy setting, but we can't imagine gay people in it, right? It's an odd thing to think about, because then you can keep going backwards until we get to like black characters, which is, you can imagine a lot in a fantasy setting except a black character. Like a lot of Tolkien's work, right, has like mostly just white people, because like that was his bias, right? Like Tolkien wasn't a avid racist. It's just like the time he lived in, most of the culture was surrounded by like, you can imagine a lot, just not a black person, right? And again, I this is like why so many people are buckling against this is because like when they imagine a fantasy, a trans person isn't in it. And I don't think that's like inherently them being like bigoted. It's definitely like bigoted coded, right? It's an underlying racism that they racist thought patterns that they have. But like I think understanding that and just going to the realization of it's a fantasy setting. You can imagine a lot in a fantasy setting. A trans person being in it isn't the biggest issue, you know?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that somebody I saw somebody say that, oh, why are there trans folks in this game? Like, games are meant to be a way for me to escape reality. And I'm like, yeah, games are meant to be a way to escape reality. What if they're also trying to escape you in a game? Like, imagine that. Imagine that. Like, you're not the only person playing this game for an escape, for an idealized society. So why would you think that you get to dictate that? And I know that a lot of people have also used, their problem is also with the language.
Yeah.
Right? They have a problem with the fact that in a fantasy setting, the character is like, because I did, like I said, I recreated a second Rook for that. And so I went with that dialogue. My first Rook's own dialogue was about how each tattoo she's gotten is a victory for her. And so she asks herself that when she's done with Veilguard, she wonders what tattoo she's going to get. And honestly, what I would love with this game is if that is how the game ends, with Larimar being like, okay, this is the next tattoo she's getting to signify her, eventual defeat of Elganan and Gillining. I would love that, because then that thought pattern of all my tattoos are a victory symbol for me, for these are the things I've overcome.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add this, right? And all of that. My second Rook, I chose the gender identity, and she's like, and it is like, it goes on like, I've always wondered about the face, the person in the mirror, and it's been satisfying to realize that, I am trans and I am going to get to save the world. And that is incredible. That's the thing about representation. The fact that you can see yourself in this game, and you can see yourself in this game being a hero and saving the world. Why would you take that away from any other person?
Exactly.
Why would you take that chance, that opportunity for this person to be like, I can insert myself with this character and I get to be the one to save the world. I get to be the one who is indestructible. I get to be the one, who is cool, who like is involved in a fictional romance with somebody that absolutely loves me, and who is a badass who never stays down, who keeps getting up, right? Who is powerful enough to unite people to go against blighted gods. Like, that is cool. That is awesome. So personally, I love the fact that we get that, right? I love the fact that, it's the same way of the people complaining about Tash being non-binary. And like I mentioned in that same previous video, right? Experiences are not universal.
Yes.
Identity is not universal. Just because the way in which you identify as being non-binary and the journey you took to get to that point should not mean that you expect Tash to have that same journey. And them having that journey does not invalidate yours. I think that that's the funniest thing about people that complain about representation being a certain way in this game. It's that this representation and how it is explored and depicted in this does not make your identity any less valid.
Yeah.
It just means
like
that this is how they are, and then this is how you are. Yeah, sorry, Knight, continue.
So sorry I keep interrupting, because like you're so right on that, because like a lot of people want to treat like Tosh as like a weird monolith for like binary representation, and I'm like, what do you mean, dude? We're not living in like the 1980s, okay, where like the most non-binary representation we got was like a freaky dude, okay? It's like, no, we don't live in that type of era anymore, right? Not every single person has to be like the best non-binary person there is, right? Because like, I'm sorry, everyone can be a bit of a dick, okay? Everyone can be a bit of a douchebag, right? Even non-binary people, And like Tosh is definitely like not necessarily a not a bad person, but definitely like,
but they are not perfect. Yeah,
they're not perfect, right? And that's fine, right? One of the appeals to Bioware games is the fact that they're characters, right? And the characters feel real. Just because you don't like the character doesn't make them a bad character, It's that sort of like weird thing that I keep hearing with the discourse around Tosh, which is like, no, she's not like, she's a bad representation for non-binary people. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, and especially it posits the question that people will who hate non-binary people, who dislike non-binary people, will change because there's good representation. They're not. If they hate non-binary people, no one's gonna change that other than like the close person, right? Stories have a lot of power, but like bigotry is one of those forces that just like is very hard to make you like emphasize. Okay, the only way for that is just to have them interact with more non-binary people in their personal lives, not just in a video game. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, back to what I initially said about language, like a lot of people have a problem with the language. And I because I'm somebody that is fascinated by language, I'm fascinated by the role it plays, linguistics, the origin of words, where they come from, why they are, why they exist, how they evolve and change, and the role they serve. And I think a lot of people that talk about how they have a problem with the word trans do not understand that. First and foremost, I get it. There are people that have been like, well, they could have said it in a more fantasy-esque way because trans is more modern lingo. And to that I say, okay, so they wanted to make it modern. You have to ask yourself why. Because these are the same people that wrote Creme. Creme did not need to say, I am trans. They described, he described his experiences, and then we realized that, oh, this is somebody who is, AFAB and, is clearly now a man, right?
Yeah.
That is how, and all of that. And I don't think people consider that. Why would, because usually, and that's why I say that language is powerful and there's a need to understand, because one, sometimes some people would use language to try and evade what they actually mean. So you need to read between the lines to be like, this is what you're saying, about this use of this specific language. But you're not saying out loud, because a lot of people do not understand that you are turning this into a straw man argument for this actual thing. Like, I get what you're doing, but a lot of people don't get that. So I was like, if you're somebody that, for example, played Inquisition, right? And even in Origins, like, BioWare has had trans characters from the very start, right? So if you ask yourself that, okay, why would this studio drastically change and go from implying, in other words, and then openly stating it with more modern language? And then you ask yourself, what purpose is it meant to serve? And I'm like, because some people want the actual term, the actual word. And there's nothing wrong with that. My best friend for the longest time did not know until she was, 27, that the word to define who she is asexual. People have implied it. They've said it in other ways. But the power that she got when she realized that it is called asexuality. And now I can research what that means to learn more about the fact that I am ace. The fact that people do not understand that is what I find interesting, because I'm like, yes, you have a problem with the fact that Tash says that they are non-binary. You have a problem with the fact that as Rook you can say you're trans, but you're saying you have a problem with it because you want to use language to silence those experiences. You want to make them more palatable for you. And being more palatable is not openly giving those words a name. And so that's the question I think a lot of us can ask, right? Sure. People are like, oh, they wish there was another, like, it's more modern lingo. And I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, clearly they are going with a modern lingo for a reason. And that is to help those who are still, because I find it interesting that this story, Tashi's story, for example, is told as somebody who is coming to terms, who is realizing. Who are the people that need defined, definite language, if not those that are trying to figure out who they are? And so therefore, they're able to follow Tashi's journey. And this is me just going through, because I have not gotten to that part of the story, but I am responding based off of a lot of the comments, that we are seeing with the fandom. That is even, fandom spoiled that for me. I wish I could, the fans spoiled that for me, actually. I wish I was discovering it as it was happening, but now I know. And, thanks to the jackass that came to the video of my comment, I was like, you called Tash she, don't you know that, they are non-binary? And I'm like, thank you for telling me now, though. But at last, and they were not saying that in good faith. This was them just being all like, you even considered her a woman. And I'm like, but you are also using this to dunk on me because of something I did not know when I made a video, even though I did state in that same video that I do think that they probably identify as non-binary. But as I was saying, their story is clearly meant to be a journey of that. And so I think that as a society, if it is that we want to be people that are more tolerant and accepting, and right now tolerance and acceptance have become these words that they think, like, some people seem to think of as a weakness. I think it takes a lot of strength as a society to accept that we are all diverse, we all have diverse identities and interests, and this should be represented in the stories and media that we get to interact with. This is very long and all of that, but those are my thoughts on the representation, right? The representation that we get to see, and the diverse stories and experience that we get with Veilguard, and why I personally love it, even though the use of language might be anachronistic, but it served the purpose. And that is something that I hold on to. So yes.
No, I agree with that. And again, as I tell a lot of people, your normal is not my normal. You know, how I grew up, my life experiences, how I love, how I see the world is not yours. And you need to respect that because I respect yours, you know? One of the biggest things about people having an issue with, you know, identities is just that, again, it seems like a foreign concept to people, but what the internet has done is expose areas that have been unseen, you know, been silenced, have been, you know, largely kept in the dark. And I think, and this is why I think video games, in my honest opinion, are sometimes the best type of storytelling, in my honest opinion, because, for example, let's just use, even though I love this series, Harry Potter. You have one perspective with Harry Potter. You know, yes, you get to experience other characters, but you have one type of protagonist, and you, even though you know you follow a narrative, but you only get that one perspective. And in a game, something like Dragon Age has always been good at, and Hark mentioned this earlier, the representation. This game has always, and also Larma, I'm thinking about your character. Nora, you said it best, that video games have always been that. And this game has always been one of these franchises that has always shown representation. It was actually, this was the first game that I saw that had, you know, queer romances. I was so blown away when I learned about BioWare. Like I told you, I saw it through Mass Effect Andromeda, didn't know what it was, typed in gay let's play, heart pops up. And it exposed me to a world of storytelling that I didn't realize I needed. You know, it helped me come to terms with being more comfortable with myself. And we're talking about a fantasy world. A real life person found comfort in a fantasy world, escapism. But it made me more comfortable in my own skin. And that may sound weird and stupid to people, but that is my truth, you know? And I think that BioWare should always be applauded, not just for Dragon Age and Mass Effect, but also for their previous games, because they also did Star Wars, and they also did the first two Baldur's Gate games that had some of those elements in there. They don't always stick the landing, but when they do it good. They do it right. And honestly, I have yet to see another company outside of BioWare and Larian do it well. You know, do it in a way where it's like, I can get behind that. I've experienced that, or I've seen that. And then being a person of color, you know, we are so far few and in between when it comes to any type of media. To actually see, especially this is something I want to applaud BioWare on with the marketing of this game, even though I know it was weird to a lot of people, but whenever they showed Rook was always someone new. Rook looked like somebody else every time. And with games like this, it is so important to do that. Now, I understand Commander Shepard is Commander Shepard, and you cannot replace Commander Shepard because he is amazing. And he is the face of that game. But when it comes to the Inquisitor, the Warden, Hawk, or Rook, it's important to establish Rook can be any gender, Rook can be any nationality, Rook can be any species, or, you know, in this world. And I like that the fact that you got to see that going throughout the marketing. And again, this company is just, this is not new to them. This isn't news. BioWare has always been this way. So the arguments against it, to me, are strange. I've never seen this level of disrespect to people as I've seen in this. And it's shocking. Like, it's really shocking. The internet exposes, you know, groups of people that haven't been exposed or really been acknowledged, but it also exposes how people have such a negative response to it. And it shows the more darker sides of humanity. And again, I think BioWare should be, again, praised on what they're doing with Veilguard, especially with a character like Taj. Again, I said this to Hark off camera. I was watching Uni Fadewalker, and when he saw the option to have his own character who is trans as him, and he cried on camera.
He was crying.
That was huge, because I know what that feels like, to not be seen and to be finally seen in a way that's not like, I'm just a thug or a drug dealer, or because I'm Black, I'm this one way. When Black people are so much more, we have so much, just like the shades of our skin, we are so many more things than what media tries to make us. And to see that, and again, I'm not trans, I can identify, I don't understand that, but I can understand what it feels like to be seen and for someone to do it in a way that's respectful. And I, again, thank you, BioWare. Thank you, writer team. It is so refreshing. And then on top of that, I'm also Asian as well. And to see Balara and for her to be done in such a unique way was, oh my God, she wasn't just this stereotype of character that I was fearing she was going to be. She's so much more than that. She's so likable and adorable and adorkable. She's like, who wrote this girl? Because this is amazing writing, and that's what I think is
John
so
Epler.
John
Epler.
John, you did your thing with that girl. And I really and I appreciate what they did with her. And I cannot wait to meet Davrin, and get to see how they interpret this character, because I love what they did with Vivienne. I love Vivienne. And so again, with Veilguard, non-binary people, trans people, they exist. They're a part of the world. Even after we're dead and gone, there are going to be trans, non-binary, LGBT, heterosexuals. It doesn't matter. We're always going to be a part of the world. We're always going to be a part of society. And I think that, again, video games are the best way of exposing that bit of those unspoken conversations, because how many times have, again, I'm pretty sure Hark and Nora, you can agree with this. How many times have we played a game where the protagonist was not us? Not in any, we can relate to them, we can get behind them, but they still were not us. And it's just, even though I love Lara Croft and I love Nathan Drake, but that is not me. And to be able to play as me is so refreshing. So again, representation and inclusion are so important. And I think video games are doing it, especially today's games, are doing it better and better. And I encourage more companies to do it. There's no need to do a message behind it. The character themselves are the message, but to do more of it and be encouraged to do it more. Again, that's my 2 cents on the matter. And I hope that was insightful.
Just to add to something you said about how, they might not always stick the landing, but they at least always try. There's a creator I follow, kind of like Knight. He does, more of a reaction to a lot of the weird ass conversations that a certain part of the gaming community like to push forward. We all know who I'm talking about. So it's TTBN Gaming. He's also on Twitter, and he said something because there was a conversation about how the problem with DEI. And the problem, we know what the problem is. Like, they're like, the problem with DEI is because of the fact that, well, the representation is never really good. It's never really great. It's just stereotypes. It's just this and that. And like, it doesn't feel like true representation, right? And all of that. And I have a lot of problem with that particular statement because that has always been a way in which society has tried to evade putting in representation, because they'll be like, well, I don't want to make a mess of it, and I'm over here like, but did you even try? And so in the tweet that they responded, they did a video where they talked about how, before we even get to the great representation, give us okay representation. Let us start with messy representation. Let us start with, okay, I will take this for now representation, and then we can build on it, rather than wait for the 10/10, 100% representation that, based off of this, you're constantly shifting and moving criteria, would never be met. And so therefore, we would never get that, right? And it's the same way in which, there was that old blowback with regard Tash. And I saw someone say that, oh, that's the problem when, certain people don't write Tash right well. And I'm like, what are you saying? Tash was written and created by Trick Weeks. another non-binary person.
Yeah.
Right. So just because you do not relate or understand that experience as you're seeing on screen does not mean that the person who created it, who is also non-binary, was not like, oh, this feels right. And so we have to consider it. They might not be, Tash might not be perfect.
Yeah.
But there is start, and there is good start, and that is something that should be celebrated. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that, Micah.
No, it's all good. But yeah, that's
So,
my 2 cents on it.
So, as the token straight white man here, I guess I should give my opinion. Maybe that'd be important.
You were a DEI hire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're the DEI
hire for this.
I'm in the sea of diverse people, and here I am, a straight white man. Okay, So I'll give my opinion on it. I don't care, like representation is cool, Like I remember the first time when I saw Zevron, right? When he tried to hit on me and I accidentally romance him, I'm like, oh shit, man, I didn't want to do that. I reloaded and I was like, okay, cool. I guess I did that. I'm not gay though. Like that was my thought process, and that's it. Same with when I went with Anders, right? And he hit on me, and okay, and no one can say anything about this. Okay, I did hit that like romance option because
there you go.
The reason I did, right? Not because I'm gay. Was because he had like just like he had like rivalry added, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. Okay, I want a friendship. Okay, and then I was like, okay, this is gonna be a tough conversation when we get to it, Anders. Okay, but understand, okay, we're platonic. Okay, like I don't get why so many people like dislike representation, because like for me as a person, right, like the only thing that really adds for me is just like more options to do, right?
Yeah.
When I play Dragon Age Origins, right, and I played as a female character and I wanted romance from Morgan, I'm like, okay, I can't do that. That does suck, but it's what it is, right? When like later on when I can get to have more options, like yeah, I have different ways of playing these characters and different ways of like interacting with them, and it's just like it's cool to see a lot of different kind of people, right? Because like to me, what I like about it is it makes a distinctiveness, right? Because I do think it is important to see yourself as a representation. So like I'm South African, right? You probably couldn't tell because I'm not an Afrikaner, okay? Like for Honora, she might have some idea of what an Afrikaner is, okay? So yeah, but like there are like a few times where I see like my country in it, and it's cool, right? It's a legitimate where you can just point to the screen and say like, "That's me, man. That's me," and it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the only real opinion I can have, right? It just adds more to games to have just different kind of characters, and it also just like it's cool to see yourself, right? And another thing I think, because Micah and Nora were building on that point, which is um, representation often is for a lot of people who are part of those communities kind of want perfect representation, because like I think there's this idea that if you don't do that, people will like not be accepting of you. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. Like people should be accepting you by default, okay? You shouldn't be accepted because you're a perfect person, okay? You should be accepted because like you are just the person, right? Like like because that logic, right, logically implies that like if I'm not a good white man, right, I should not be called a white man. I'm suddenly not white. It's like no. But but for some reason when it's applied to other like races and like other genders and other sexualities, it's like, okay, cool, no longer valid. No? Huh? Like being a non-binary person is not like always a point of representation. It's just a character like mark that anyone has, right? It's like a white person being white, it's not mean anything, so I always think it's odd because like and this is a good thing about Tosh is just a character who happens to be non-binary, which is a good thing, same with like Zevron or Doran's a bit of a different thing, but like same thing. They're just the characters who happen to be queer, which is a good thing, right? Because you want to get to that point where they're just people who are a kind of thing,
Yeah.
Which but like again, straight white man here, token straight white man here, probably not an important opinion here.
No, every voice to the conversation is important when it's talking about inclusion and representation. And this is one thing I do want to say is that I like how BioWare, they did include other nationalities, but they didn't exclude anybody. And that's one thing that because I still am on the train of, yes, include everybody, but don't exclude white people just because you're trying to include everybody else. There's always room at the table.
Let me be as pacey as I am in real life, okay? Please, BioWare.
Oh my goodness.
Even before the game was released, I was watching a whole bunch of videos that people put on their YouTube channels on the early character creator. Because a lot of people got to see the character creator ahead of time. And I just remember how toxic so many of the comments were, especially referring to things like the gender affirmation scarring on options on the body. And
the top surgery scars.
And I'm the kind of person who I like to live my life in a way where leave people better than you find them. You have a choice in life. You can either leave people better than you find them, worse than you found them, or neutral. And so that's why it always disappoints me when I see comments like that, because I feel like when you're saying things like, oh, I guess I'm not buying this game anymore. Oh, we're gonna boycott this game because of this one little option that maybe you can totally ignore.
You can ignore.
I'm thinking if that is what's causing you to just totally dismiss a game, then you're living a life of privilege, my friend. Like that's what I'm like. You're living a life of privilege if that's what's gonna get you to stop playing a game. So I found that very like disheartening. And I love hearing about stories through their eyes in things like the mirror that you were talking about, the mirror conversation, and how people would be crying when they see that option. I really want to see that and experience that through people, because that's how I felt when I first started playing Dragon Age Origins, and I was able to see myself, truly myself, for the first time represented in the game. I cried tears of joy. It was like, I can be a gay character in this game and not feel, weirded out by other people like I do in real life, like that escapism that Noria was telling me about. And so a lot of people don't understand what that feels like if they've felt represented their entire life, or they felt like they've seen themselves in games all their life. A lot of people like to say, I don't want people stuffing this queerness down my throat. I'm like, do you know how much heterosexuality has been stuffed down my throat since I was born? How much it was stuffed at it's hard for me to sympathize for people who are like, I don't like this being stuffed down my throat. I don't like how this is being I'm like, I'm sorry.
What's always funny is when it's like, what is being shoved down your throat, and
that part.
It's never answered, right? Because it's just legitimately you just mean a gay character existing.
They just exist, and you just happen to know somehow that they exist. Yes,
and it's not like Tosh is looking at me directly into the screen saying like trans rights. Like, no,
right?
She's not saying that. She's not saying like, oh, by the way, if you're white, stop playing the game. I'm like, oh, okay.
None of that is happening.
It's just a person who happens to be, trans or like non-binary, right? And like, again, the same would apply to like a white person, right? The logic is so incongruent, because it's just like, if you apply like literally anyone who's watching this, right, all this woke stuff applied to a white person, right, and it just crumbles. It crumbles. And the reason like why it needs to be done by that is because you need to see how ridiculous the statement is, right? Because again, somehow it doesn't apply to like white person, but it applies to literally everyone else, which is just like
because
dumb,
because white supremacy wants white folks to feel like they are by definition the default, and so
The
any
default.
any shifting of that is now okay. They are moving away from the default. The default for white supremacy heteropatriarchy is that be white, be straight, be male. Sorry, Knight.
Yeah.
So therefore,
It's
the
okay.
expectation is that the expectation is that if you're anything outside of that bracket,
Yeah.
and even
Yeah.
with that, there's still an hierarchy of okay, fine. If you're not white, straight, and male, at least be white, straight, and
Yeah.
female. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Then you're not that. Okay, at least be white, gay, and male. Then,
Yeah.
there's the
Yeah.
hierarchy to exactly how the society expects you, and so therefore,
Yeah.
the system revolts at the thought of people pushing back and saying that nah, this cannot be allowed to stand.
Yeah.
Everybody is equal, and everybody should be thus seen and represented
Yeah.
across media, and then they push back. So the woke conversation has been
Honey, I went to sleep on that conversation.
because I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what I was trying to say was, like, I had that moment. I had that opportunity to see myself back in Origins. I want that for other people. I want that for the
Yes.
trans community. Why wouldn't I want that for the trans community? And maybe again, because I've experienced it myself and other people who perhaps happen to be straight white male, it doesn't really resonate with them as much, but hopefully they are open enough to try to understand like where that's coming from, where that desire and need comes from.
Yeah.
We were talking a lot about Tosh, and I know that Tosh is a character that is recruited a little bit later on, but I do think that Tosh is very relevant to our topic, and I will be very careful to not reveal any story spoilers. But
okay.
I cried as I was going through a lot of Tasha's storyline, because even though I'm not trans myself, so many things that happens hit me like that happened to me. Like it didn't happen exactly the same way, but that was me. Like me and what Tash is going through and feeling, like I felt like reliving some of my past experiences, and I broke down crying because I haven't felt that in years.
Yeah.
And it just sort of reopened some scarring, like some previous scarring that I've had. Um, and I thought this is why I love stories and representation in stories, is because it allows me to educate myself, to expose myself to things, to understand. Because even though I'm queer, I don't know what it's like being a trans person. I don't know what it's
Same.
like. I've always thought of myself as a male. Like I'd never had any gender affirmation journey or whatever. And
Right.
so, but I want to learn what that's like through the eyes of other people, through my friends and companions. And you
Yeah.
only get to do that if, again, you open yourself up to allow yourself to experience that and put yourself in other people's shoes. And some people
Yeah.
struggle being willing to do
Yeah.
that. It's outside of their comfort zone. And one thing also that I wanted to mention with what a lot of you were saying earlier, about how Tosh, for example, may not be the ideal paragon of non-binariness.
Right.
I will be very transparent with you all because I know I'm a work in progress. I know I'm not perfect. But I did have some personal issues with Zevron as a gay character in Dragon Age Origins, because I, as a gay man, didn't feel like Zevron was a good enough representation in a mainstream game to introduce people to a gay character, because I felt Zevron fits too much of the stereotypes. He's flirty, he's promiscuous, he's ready to just jump in bed with you. Like
Right.
after having one conversation with you, he'll just ready to jump in bed with you. If you're a man, he'll flirt with you unprompted. And so, like, I was like, I don't know if this is the best way to introduce a type of character to straight people. This is another reason why
Right.
I had a lot of personal issues with Cam from Modern Family. Cam from Modern Family fits a lot of stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I definitely I was more of a, sorry, what's Cam's husband? I forgot his name. But
Mitch.
Mitch,
Mitch?
I was like, I was more of a Mitch person because I related more with Mitch than
Yeah.
I did with Cam. But I realize years later, like now it's at least that I have to
Yeah.
get past that. I have to get over to that because there are plenty of queer people, gay people who do fit the stereotype and other people who
Yeah.
don't. And that's okay. And you don't have to have the paragon of all gayness
Yes.
represent me, because that's not like the point. That's not like the purpose of
Right.
this character. So I love
Um,
learning that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Knight.
sorry, because I just thought of this right now because like
Mhm.
Nora was talking about like how a lot of like white supremacy is trying to make like white person like a default thing, right? Um, so here's the thing, right? That point you made about like avatar of like all gayness, right?
Mhm.
It's a kind of a white supremacy point because like white supremacy
Mm-hmm.
is is individualizing a specific group, like mythologizing like a
Yeah.
group into like
Yeah.
one
Yes.
person, right? And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like applying that logic to then like other queer like characters as well, right? Because it's like
Right.
they need to be the like avatar of like
Right.
their ideology, right?
Mm,
Because that's
mhm,
their thought process, right? That's them projecting onto them, right? And like
Yeah.
mm.
it like again like it's not just about like that ideology like projecting itself into the other ones as well, but it's also about like you want people to see you on your best footing, right? You want to see them in a
Yeah.
way that like accepts them. It's not because like it is a bit of a two both of those ideas combined,
Yeah.
but it is also like the point of like you want them to see like yeah, it's not just all stereotypes, right? But like
Yeah.
sometimes it is just a character like that, and sometimes it's just like the best you can do at the moment, you
Yeah.
know.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm, mm,
Tosh
mm.
doesn't have to be the non-binary messiah
Right.
of the world, right? They just have to be
Yeah.
them,
Yes.
Yeah.
and that should be enough.
They
And that
them
should
their
be
way
okay.
on the cross, you know.
Right,
And
right.
that
Exactly.
is, yeah. And
Yeah.
you know,
And
to just to build on what you said about Zevran arc, I also think that and of course you already said that that was back then and this is now, but I think that something else that a lot of people also forget about the choice of promiscuity on Zevran's
Mm-hmm.
part is that it's a trauma response,
Yeah.
and that is
mm-hmm.
also
Yeah,
representative, right? That is
yes.
also representation, right?
Right.
Because you know, hypersexualization as a trauma response is something that some people have like deal with, and then they're like, oh yeah, that is me. You know,
Yeah.
that is how I react to this. That is
Right.
Yeah.
what then drives that. And that is why part of, you know, his own story is you like in a romance with him, is you being able to show him that it's not just about the sex,
Yeah.
because that is all his own story has always been. It's always been about the sex for his like,
Yeah.
you know, his past. And what you get to show him as the warden is that you see beyond that. You see
Yeah.
to the more what, you know, he has to offer, and that then starts his own healing journey. So like even with that, even with what seems like a seeming stereotype, it still feeds further into his own story and
Yeah.
narrative. And
Yeah,
I
like
think that that's something that BioWare does really well.
yeah, like literally like at the end, right, when you ask Zevron about his last mission before he went to Ferelden, right? He said
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know why I took the contract up for you? It wasn't because I thought I could beat you. It was because I thought you could kill me. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my
Wow.
word.
Yeah.
Like this
It's deep.
recontextualizes literally
Right.
everything about your character.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, there's a reason why you went after me. Okay, it was because you thought you succeeded. It's because you thought I would literally just kill you, and you were so
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
surprised because of that. You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to add about Tosh, and this again may seem very left field to people, but gender identity has never been an issue for me because I always known I was a boy. But people often mistake me because of the pitch of my voice. If they don't see my face,
Mm.
they think I'm a woman.
Mm.
And when I was much younger and very skinny and I had long hair, I cannot tell you how many times I was approached by men to get my number. And
Mm.
even though I'm all big and dude now, people to this day still think I'm trans sometimes. So I think I haven't met Tosh yet, but I think I might have a similar experience if it's going in a direction that I think it might go. Because I have been told, even when I was a young man, oh, Micah, you're not a boy. I mean, you're not a girl, you're a boy. Why do you look like that? I'm like, this is not, this is just what I look like. I can't control this. You know, so as I got older, I started trying to do things like make sure my facial hair was out. I would wear, like, you know, try to dress with baggier clothing sometimes. And I remember all throughout the early years of my dating Christina, some people question if I was just a gay guy pretending to be straight with her, you know, and it's just like, no, that's not true. I'm telling you, when people don't understand gender identity, when people don't understand that element of part of being a person, it's so deep. And now I'm even more excited to meet Taj based on what you're saying and what my experiences were. And they may not line up, but I can say I've been there. So sorry to go off on a random side tangent.
No problem.
Yeah, no.
I'm ready to cry. Like if I'm
like I'm ready, emotional, like I'm feeling it.
I am going to grab the tissues and I'm going to just cry.
Oh my God, but yeah.
I'll end this topic with a question that I'm actually directing to Noria. But Knight and Micah, you're feel free to chime in. This is a question I actually already asked Micah during one of our analysis videos. And this actually is off the topic of gender identity and more about racial representation. Because one thing that I really love about our companions this time is you have Balara, who is a very Asian-looking elf. And then you have Davrin, who is a black elf, who we actually haven't really seen very much in the previous Dragon Age games. And so my question to Noria is, do you feel that it's important for the fact that Davrin happens to be a black elf? Do you think that should be addressed in game, or do you think it should not even be addressed at all? It should be glossed over? Because for me as an Asian person, I would love for Balara to speak on, you know, hey, yeah, I come from this clan. We're from this region, which is like the Asian region of, because I want to learn more about that and just see myself more and just hear whatever experiences she may or may not have experienced being an Asian elf in society. I personally would love that, but I don't know about you, especially with someone like Davrin, like how you feel about that, if it should even be mentioned or addressed or not.
For me personally, and of course, this is still tied to us talking about how none of our experiences we are not a monolith in ourselves. So I can't speak generally for like all Black fans of the game. Just for me personally, I do not necessarily mind. By virtue of him being there, he is a Black elf. By virtue of him being there, he is a statement, especially to the type of fans that have previously said, well, Black elves do not exist. Because I have been in spaces where now, and this is something like, you know, I've discussed with Micah outside of us making videos when we just chat together. I'm like, every single game I play, if you give me a character creator, if it's a role-playing game, best believe that it's going to be Black. That person is going to be Black. It's an elf, it's going to be Black. My Commander Shepard, she's always Black. She's Black, she's a woman, she's also queer. She does not have my locks because there's no locks in Mass Effect, but like that buzz with like a slightly dyed red hair, she's an absolute badass. Like by virtue of that identity, it is we are here and we exist. And that is great. That I love that. So I don't need them to be like, oh, there's another region, because like, you know, law-wise, the way in which Thedas has always been described, law-wise, it's not like, oh, there's some sort of specifically Asian part of like Thedas. The inspiration has always been more on cultures and everything else. And, you know, the story so far has been specific, right? So we know that Olay is, you know, inspired by the French. We know that Treviso is, you know, inspired by the, you know, Italian, some part of Spain, you know, a little bit of Mediterranean influences. Like that has always been how they've been, right? I personally do not want the game to then try and invent another region because then it then feels inauthentic to the lore that they've been telling me all this while, and the world building, because I am big on world building. But instead, what I would love for them to do, and that is something that they did with Veilguard, it's in the subtlety. And I love the subtlety, because the subtlety for me is like, oh, you're blowing my mind, right? Delara is the chef. And this is, quick part. Once again, not major spoilers. She loves to cook. When you recruit her, if you read the codexes, and I'm a big fan of always reading the codexes, you see that part of when she's packing, she has all these spices and all the foods. Like, she's the one that she's like, this is what we're cooking, and this is what I need. And oh, I got this from this person, and I got this for this person, and we're going to make this real cool food. And so the first time you see her and Nev together in Nev's room, and they're talking about food, and she mentions a specific dish that is linked to that dish is an actual dish.
Yes,
an
it is.
actual cultural dish that exists.
Yeah.
So I don't need them to bring like an actual people, but like if, for example, one of the meals that Davrin asks for is something that, is like black soul food.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh yeah,
okay, y'all get it.
So that's y'all get like that kind of thing. Like, so you can do subtlety and like build into that. I don't need them to like create a whole new like continent separate, right? Because where did humans come from and all of that. Maybe when we go deeper, because there's still that old origin of where did the different groups come from, right? If they go outside of the continent, then we can start exploring that. But that has not been the story that's been told so far. So I'm perfectly fine with Davin by virtue of I see that melanin, I see that man, that is a black elf, and he's amazing. And I'm like, awesome.
And then the titties on display, yes, let's go.
Like, every little time is like, I gotta flex this, and I'm like, Davin, thank you for the service. Please never find a shirt. Never find an inner shirt. Just keep them pecs on display.
I will make sure, Davrin, you will never wear a shirt again, okay? I will destroy all your clothes.
Thank you. I'm like, transmog system for the win. Because, sometimes I'm looking at that armor and I'm like, why is it covered? We need like, we know you're protected, but just keep flaunting. But yeah, so like
Free
I said,
those deep roads, Davrin. Free those deep roads. Yes.
So I love the fact that, by virtue of him existing, he's just there as, representation. But there are little things that they can do that I'll be like, like I'll be the pointing at the screen that Knight said, and be like, oh my God, yes, that, like, I recognize that, I see that, I know that is great. That would be great to see. But yes, so that's just me like thinking with that.
Awesome. Do any of you three in general have anything else to say before we close?
Well,
Go ahead,
I
Knight.
guess on my topic on that representation part, like I get the impulse to want to have characters that like speak on issues that you have as well, but I do think that those because oftentimes when I think about trans stories and how best trans stories can be conveyed, I'm always like kind of conflicted on two fronts, right? On the first front is some trans people want their experiences being shared, right? And like having like this is how I found out I was trans, and these are the sort of like pushbacks I got. It's all that. And it's like, yeah, okay, like that's obviously true. But then some other trans people also want the representation of just like they're just trans. They're a normal person like you and me, and they just exist. Like they just want their character just be in a fantasy setting because they just like that idea, right? Which, to be fair, right? Who doesn't want to just see themselves in a fantasy setting, right? And like same with like other races as well. And I feel like the way that like Byron did it, would just have them existing, is pretty cool, especially with how like Dragon Age has depicted its lore. Like we've never seen any like racism along color lines, we've always seen it just on literal like, and this is obviously weird for fantasy settings, like biological lines, like there are literal differences between an elf and a human, right? Obviously there's no like intelligence stuff, but that's besides the point. Like and that is, to me, like if they do introduce it, and what Nori said, it kind of feels a bit inauthentic. It's just like this thing didn't exist before. Now you're talking about it now. Why are you talking about it now?
Why?
Why didn't you do it beforehand? The issue isn't
Yeah.
that you're talking about it. The issue is why you're talking about it like 15 years now.
Yeah.
That's the, I think, issue that does feel like, and like those things should be talked about, right? Those things should be represented, right? But it
Oh,
should
yeah.
be represented when it feels authentic. But yeah, but that's my opinion.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to the three of you for joining me today in this discussion. For those of you who are watching, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for hanging out with us in our little fireside chat. Don't forget that there are 3 other parts in the other YouTubers' respected videos on their channels. I'll put links in the bottom so you can check those out. Definitely tell them that I sent you. And yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been great. I hope you all had fun, and I hope maybe you learned something along the way. So until next time, everybody, love yourselves and love each other. Bye-bye.
Bye.